Hey, good morning. What's up, all my lifestyle athletes? Dr. G here. So, I wanted to do a quick review, high level, just for fun, because I'm a huge nerd, about some of the differences in fluid dynamics and why we feel. What's the story with the pump when we're weight training versus cardio? What's happening? Why do we tend to feel different? If you've ever had a really good lift and you're in the shower after and you're like, whoa, okay, like this is a real thing. You're kind of feeling leaner, looking leaner in that acute time frame. Doesn't have anything to do with fat loss. You likely didn't lose any significant weight. But I just wanted to review it here in case you're interested. So let's dive in. So this is just a quick analysis, of kind of what happens in the acute phase with fluid after, during and after the different types of exercise. We have resistance training over here, cardiovascular training over here. So in the acute phases, we're just going to kind of do almost like a little side-by-side comparisons. I think that's helpful to get a sense of a bit of the differences. So as we start resistance training, just in general, we get, this applies to all types of exercise. We start to get some fluid, certainly blood and nutrients flooding into the muscle tissue. So, and that's going to happen here too. So this is on this side, but also over here too. So we start to get blood and nutrients flooding into the muscle tissue because of the work that it's doing. And this is primarily driven by subcutaneous or extracellular, or we would call interstitial fluids as well, being pulled into the muscle tissue via the byproducts, by osmotic pressure, by the byproducts of tissue metabolism. So when we start working out, we start creating things like hydrogen ions, lactate, byproducts of metabolism. They start to accumulate, and then what we need to do is we need to buffer that. And what the body does is it typically brings in fluid and other things like bicarbonate and other things as well to modify the pH, but to also help reduce the osmotic pressure within the cell. So we start to get this fluid uptake. In cardiovascular training, what generally happens is there's more of a systemic, fluid dynamics. So this kind of like first three here are dealing with the fact that we still have this blood and nutrient flow over here, but we have more what we would call sweating and fluid loss overall during cardiovascular training. So, and this fluid loss is not muscle focused. Like it doesn't shift from the muscle, from the subcutaneous and extracellular compartment into the muscle cell. Instead, we're sweating it out. Or there's just a more of a generalized fluid shift. So we have, because cardiovascular exercise, depending on your training status, individuals will have less of these metabolites building up within the muscle tissue, or at least they are buffered and metabolized at the appropriate rate, so there's less buildup. So we don't have nearly as much of this in cardiovascular exercise. Therefore, we're going to have less muscle fluid shifting into the tissue, into the muscle cells itself, and that gives you that kind of like muscle pump sensation. In addition, going back to resistance training, glycogen utilization in the tissue is higher in resistance training. in the first several, first part of cardiovascular training, we're definitely using glycogen as well. But what we tend to see here is a buildup, once again, or a utilization here, and that brings more fluid in. And then what happens is that fluid gets used up to burn this glycogen, and then the body refills it. So you feel that kind of like that pump after. All right, so inflammation. Inflammation is generally higher in terms of like the micro trauma response from resistance training as it relates to the muscle cell fibers and tissues. This does happen in cardiovascular training, of course, depending on the duration and your particular training status. So it's not unique to resistance training, and it's not exclusive to resistance training. I know that I've gone on plenty of runs and cardiovascular exercise workouts where I came back super sore. So the trauma can be there, but overall, we would consider that when we're really stressing the muscle tissue with loading and the eccentric kind of micro tearing dynamic, that's going to be more. So we get more of what's an inflammation response. That also brings fluid in after the fact, so we get a little bit more of that pump too. Finally, vessel constriction and dilation. There's what we would call a constrict and dilate effect. When we contract the muscles to maximum contraction, we're actually constricting blood flow through the vessels, which they are primarily kind of mechanically cut off from flow. And then we have this dilation response that tends to follow. So it's an alternating constriction, dilation. Even if it's not an actual vessel, the vessels aren't necessarily narrowing. Like if you had a natural vessel constriction, let's say if when you stick your hand or your feet in cold water, you get vessel constriction. This is different. This is a mechanical constriction followed by the resultant dilation and increased blood flow. So that's going to lead to that overall sense of like fluid shifting away from underneath the skin and between the muscle cells into the muscle tissue itself. Overall general sense of reducing pushing the muscle tissue out against the skin, making it feel and look closer to the surface of the skin, even though the fat content underneath the skin hasn't changed. And in cardiovascular exercise, we have primarily vessel dilation. Dilation of the great vessels, the aortic and the aortic trunk, but also the smaller and distal peripheral vasculature tends to dilate in a kind of a universal or more systemic fashion. So anyway, that's a quick high-level rundown of what happens when we do different types of training. So don't be surprised, when you have a really good pump, really good lift, really good training, resistance training, it is a real thing. We should feel and we should enjoy that feeling of feeling leaner. However, don't mistake it for instant fat loss. Of course, that doesn't happen after one session. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it. I tried to make this one short enough, but it seems like a little bit longer than I had hoped. Anyway, just send any comments, please like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube if you want to see more. Send some topics that you want me to work through, either in this method or a different one, and I'll be happy to do so. All right, take care.